Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Omoyele Shore, and this is Sahara TV reaching you live, this time from Providence in Rhode Island. Where are the Achebe Colloquium on Africa, the 2011 edition of Chinua Achebe's Colloquium that takes place annually at the Brown University in Providence. All right, viewers, this is Sahara TV Live, and as we promised you 2 weeks ago, we were going to bring you Professor Chinua Achebe at the Achebe Colloquium. This is a man, the big Iroko, as they say in Nigeria, after whom this colloquium is named at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. Professor, thank you very much for coming on Sahara TV.
It's good to come, and it's good to see you.
I know that we just invited you to come say hello.
Yes.
But we need you to say hello in all the languages you know how to say it.
Oh, no, I only have one language. The rest are subsidiaries.
Okay.
The language, my mother tongue, is Dalano, Keneunu, Adukwama. Then I have the English who came in and said only their own should be spoken. And they'll say hello. So hello, Unudukwama. Yes. I should have been speaking Yoruba because I went to school in Yoruba land.
Ah, where?
University of Ibadan.
Wow.
Yes. And
no single Yoruba word you know how to say?
No, well, one woman who wanted to hear me say something in Yoruba, and I kept insisting that I didn't have one single word. And then she said something about Yoruba. So thank you.
Yes, this is just it. We just want to have you and to just lastly say to our viewers at home in Nigeria, because you remember recently your name came up about rejecting the national honor for the second time. What would you like to see improve, lastly, before we leave you in Nigeria?
Well, it was stated clearly when I was offered the first award. I detailed what was missing. 7 years later, they gave me the same award without any change. So I said, this is ridiculous. I can't start explaining again, yet again. So when Nigeria is working, we will all know. There's no point asking me. Every Nigerian knows what needs to be done. The leaders are particularly qualified to know, and they should be able to do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For coming on Sahara TV. You have been Professor Chinua Achebe, and today's Achebe Colloquium in Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you for coming, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dalu.
Taking place. We've got panelists, speakers, lots of interesting topics that will be discussed thoroughly from today and tomorrow throughout this whole weekend. Right now, I'm here in the studio with Mr. OLaughlin George. Can you just say hello to our viewers?
Hello.
And he's the Associate Professor of English and Africana Studies here at Brown University. So they just finished the panel on Arab Spring. Can you just give us some points that you thought were particularly interesting in this panel that just ended about the Arab Spring Revolution?
Thanks very much for inviting me to this interview, first of all.
You're welcome.
I would say of the variety of very interesting things that were discussed at the panel, there are four that I think sort of stood out at me. One is the statement, which was then elaborated upon during the Q&A session, to the fact that in any kind of revolutionary process, when you have a kind of non-violent rebellion, A revolution is by definition non-violent because it's trying to contest and transform a particular social or political situation. And at the moment that that rebellion or revolution is successful, it has to institute laws. It has to establish a new form of order. And in doing that, there is always the possibility of a new coercion.
So you're saying that a revolution has to be nonviolent to be a revolution? Is that what you're implying?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but that a nonviolent revolution, when it succeeds, has to reinstate order by means of laws. And that laws can be inherently coercive by nature.
Okay.
So there has to be that sort of paradoxical recognition of the creativity of a rebellion, but at the same time, the necessity for social cohesion in the form of laws that follows the revolution.
With some people, you have your own definition of revolution. What do you want? So for Boko Haram, for example, they have their own idea of revolution. They want Sharia law in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab. So would you call that revolution as well, that what they're trying to implement, these extremist groups, are they part of the revolution of sub-Saharan Africa?
Sadly, for those who take that position, however reprehensible one may find it, they will see it as a revolution.
Right.
And in a sense, the task of intellectuals, the task of conferences and colloquia such as these is to assess and pay a close attention to these developments on the ground in order to be able to distinguish between quote-unquote revolutions that are genuinely emancipatory for the greatest number of the people and revolutions that just call themselves that and are not necessarily promising in that direction.
Excellent point. Well, thank you so much, Professor George. It was a pleasure.
Oh, it was my pleasure too.
We'd like to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have with me Professor Oken Ndibe, who is a professor of literature at Trinity College. He's also a visiting professor here at Brown University. Okay, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, what has been your impression about what's going on here today?
Well, this is the third edition of the Achebe Colloquium, and I think that this is perhaps one of the most important and the most topical, certainly. That Africa is under a lot of convulsion, what we call the Arab Spring, and the continent elsewhere, whether you talk about Southern Africa with the situation in Zimbabwe, or the situation in the Sudan, where a new country is being created out of Africa. I think that all this, the colloquium's emphasis on all these areas of conflict or areas of interest and development in Africa has made this year's colloquium particularly important, I think. So it's been very extraordinary in a lot of ways to have a gathering of policymakers and intellectuals, diplomats and so on from all over the continent to reflect on Africa and its drama.
So far, have you had anything that gives you any hope that what we're seeing in the North African and Arab areas of the world could extend to the sub-Saharan African countries?
I can't say that I see signs, but you also have to realize that what we call the Arab Spring is in a lot of ways, it's coordinated in a lot of ways, but in some ways it was also rather spontaneous. And so there is the sense by some that sub-Saharan African countries are not quite ready for the kind of ferment, for the kind of revolutionary impetus that has been revealed in the Arab world. But I think that the situation in much of Africa, especially in a country like Nigeria, is particularly catastrophic, that we have slipped into a state where human existence itself has become untenable. That when one travels through Nigeria, the space called Nigeria, that you see people living at animal levels, you see. And so when you animalize people, which is what's happening in Nigeria, ultimately, when you least expect it, when it's least predictable, they might turn and get back at you with the same kind of ferocity that the state has treated them. So there are no signs, I think, but things could change in a hurry, quickly.
Which is very interesting because one of the participants here was observed that all the experts there didn't predict
Yes.
what is happening now. The question is, why then do they come here every now and then to discuss these things when they can't see what is happening, they can't predict? And it seemed like many of them have worked with some of these governments that are being overthrown.
Good.
So what is their role? What's the importance of this to ordinary people on the street, in Africa?
That is a very pertinent question you just raised. There is, on the one hand, the question of the connection between scholarship and the street, okay? So a lot of times you find that those who presume to be experts are the most profoundly confounded, the most profoundly confused about developments in the world. So yes, somebody did make the point that the phenomenon that we call the Arab Spring was absolutely unforeseen, was not foreseen by the experts, both in the West as well as in the Arab countries themselves. So ultimately what that tells me is that there is a particular logic to the street. There is a particular acuity to the experience of people who are out there, downtrodden masses in African countries, that is in the context of its violence and in the context of just the degradation of the human in these countries, can actually not be conceptually grasped by the scholars who ultimately are more in touch with the misruling classes in Africa. And so if there's going to be a convulsion, a revolution in much of Africa, I suspect that it's going to come as a surprise to the intellectual class, to the pundits, as well as to those who are running these African countries catastrophically.
I'm the ambassador of Libya to the United Nations, actually, to the United States in the House today. And Libya had just experienced what we can call a maze of changes. I don't know whether to call it a revolution, a mass uprising, an internal conflict. It almost degenerated into a war at a point. At what point did you know, having worked with Gaddafi for how many years, that things were going to give somehow?
Well, what happened in Libya is a real revolution, but no one expected that would be a revolution during Gaddafi time. No one can predict it at all. Myself, I was hopeless that the Libyan people, they have to rest of their life that with Gaddafi and Gaddafi's families.
Let me ask, when you were here during the Gaddafi regime, was there any time Gaddafi was in touch with you when things started to break apart? Or when you were in touch with him directly and saying, look, things are changing?
No. Gaddafi, I never call each other by phone, Gaddafi and I. I'm not from his circle, not from his tribe.
Why did he leave you to represent Libya and the US?
That's a good question.
Yes.
The question, he brought me here, or the government, they brought me here, because I'm a professional diplomat. Since I joined the Foreign Service since the monarch regime, 1968.
Wow.
And they serve in London, in Malaysia, Argentina, Brazil, Canada. And they brought me here. They believe that I'm the one who can repair the damage in the relation between the United States and Libya. That's the only thing, principle.
So there was a point where you had to break away from the government, and after the uprising in Benghazi. So didn't they contact you to say, well, you are sabotaging us and we're going to deal with you if we find you?
Well, well, the only one I called when the uprising started, and that exactly, I think maybe it was in the 18th of February, the chief of intelligence, because I know him and we have for a long time. Then I asked him questions. What happening in Libya? What's going on? Why all this killing? What? Please tell me. We are really desperate here. And he told me, no, don't worry. There is just some drunk peoples.
Rats.
Yeah, on drugs and everything under control. Then when he told me that, then just like that you push me in an icy swimming pool, then that was the last and the first telephone call I made with Gaddafi's regime people. But Gaddafi, I never spoke to him, and or I never contacted him as I said before.
You know, the interesting question people want to ask you is that, you know, when he comes to the U.S., comes to a huge delegation, he wants to put his tent. Are you the guy who have to make all that arrangement to help him?
Well, as ambassador to the United States, of course, myself and the ambassador to the United Nations, we have to work to arrange his visit.
So you're helping the guy that you hate,
of course,
to set up his tent?
As far as we accepted the post.
Hypothetically speaking.
No, as far as we accept the post as ambassador to the United States or in any country, and when he comes, Gaddafi or any from the member of the cabinet, then I have to do just exactly what I'm supposed to do as a professional, but not more than that. Sometimes he went to different countries, people they bring him escorts, women, people they do party for him. That's not my type.
I heard that some ambassadors even get Viagra. Did you have ever have to do that?
Maybe, I'm not aware of that.
Let's go to the next topic, which is, you know, the conflict also dragged on for a while, making people feel like maybe Gaddafi might be able to create a civil war. When you resigned, or when you joined the opposition at the point you became an activist, where did you go? Did you stay in the U.S.? Did you have to move to another country?
Well, you remember I resigned in a very early stage. The revolution started officially on the 17th, and I resigned on the 21st. And that time, I don't know what's going to happen to me, to my family. We have no place to go. I'm not a businessman. I'm a man who receives salary at the end of each month. Then that was a question, but that was not my priority. My priority, how can I help to stop the killing of the Libyan people, to stop the raping of Libyan women by the Gaddafi's mercenaries at Gaddafi. So that was my priority. And Gaddafi made it very easy for me, especially his son, when he came out on the TV on the 21st of February, and he said two things, that we rule you or we kill you. Then I went straight to Al Jazeera and I resigned. It was very easy for me to decide at that time. If, say, he came and he said something different to stop the killing, that maybe the revolution will not be succeed.
Last question is that you got a lot of help from NATO and the U.S. government and all of these Western European countries. And the question is, how are you going to be able to pay back the debt, you know, knowing that these guys love oil?
We are not paying anything back. Why should we back? These countries, they came to implement the Security Council of the United Nations. Then why should we shoot them back?
So you are not under pressure to give out contracts,
No,
oil blocks to oil companies from different parts of the world?
Libya, it needs a lot of constructions, infrastructure, a lot. And we need to build our institution also. We will have business with the African countries and the American country, America and the Western Europe, of course, or the Arab countries. Not only NATO and the United States, the one who helped us. No, there are some Arab countries, there are some African countries, there are Latin countries. Also, they came to help us. And we have to do business, either we after the war or before the war. Business have to. This is the nature of the relation between the countries. But will not be subject to the pressure from any country.
That's what I want to hear. Ambassador, it's been a great pleasure talking to you, especially after you experienced the revolution.
Thank you.
And we hope you help us push some of that revolution down south to Africa. We need it.
That's your duty, my friend.
All right.
That's your